I feel like SDRs and BDRs are being very mistreated right now. As leaders, it's our responsibility. We're failing them. So I'm not putting this on the SDRs. It's like putting blame on children for parents not being good parents. We're not helping them enough. We're not training them enough. We're not thinking about the fact that they're people. We're not teaching them interpersonal skills. We are failing our customers by really not giving a shit about them. And that comes through in our leadership and what we train our salespeople on. You can go into a company and fail miserably, but if you went into company B, you could have succeeded. Many of the conversations when I started the conversation was, look, I've done some research. A lot of what I see leads me to a conclusion that we might be a fit. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions to determine if it's even worth any of ours time? And they're like, yeah, okay, yeah, I guess. And then I ask initiated questions.
Hey, welcome back to the SDR Hire podcast. I'm your host, Stefan, and if you are new to this channel, this is a place where you can learn from top producing salespeople what it's like actually working in tech sales. How do you break in? What do companies look for? How to get promoted? And how to actually be successful in tech sales. Today, our guest is Sara Storm. Sara has been leading SDR teams and revenue functions for almost 10 years now, from being head of revenue to VP of sales and business development to multiple sales advisory roles. And Sara is currently running her own consultancy with her husband and is about to launch a platform called Skills, as well as a book that is directed straight for SDRs. So Sara, without further ado, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's exciting to be here.
Amazing. So Sara, can you give us, so I hinted a little bit towards your background. I mean, what I usually do, I would call out a few roles that the person that I'm interviewing has had, but like you've had so many. I was just like, it was just a bunch of them, but like, can you walk us through a little bit of your background and how you got to where you are right now?
Yeah, of course. But so I think that my background, I've been in revenue forever. I started my first proper job when I was, 19 as a salesperson. So I've been working in sales forever and I love the profession so much. And I think it's super engaging, so exciting, and you learn every day, which is something I feel is very important, at least for my own personal growth. I really enjoy being pushed and challenged and doing that for myself throughout my career. But some highlights, I guess, would be going from a head of revenue role, which was my first leadership role when I was at an agency, managing a team, and then sort of moving over to being in a software company called Revenue, where I was head of business development. And that was actually not a role where I had SDRs. It sounded like I did, but I did not. So what I did was that I was a function, because Revenue was at a state where they needed to scale their business. So they were a startup moving over to the scale-up stage, right? So they had 200 people across the Nordics and Europe, and they were looking to get rid of all of the kinks that you get to when you get to growth pains, right, as a company. So I actually wrote my own role, and then I went to Revenue CEO and I said, you're going to need this because you're looking to scale, and these will be the issues, and these are the projects I think I need to come in and help you do over a course period of 2 to 3 years, right? And while doing that process, I was sort of behind the scenes between market, sales, and customer success to really look at churn levels, to look at sales revenue numbers, to improve how we got leads in, all the way to getting them closed, all the way to getting them to stay after the first year, right? So that was very much behind the scenes work. We did basically an education program, a complete for all the sales and customer success people, also for marketing per role, to increase your hit rate and what you achieved in your specific role, to train you on specific skills you needed as an SDR, or as you needed as an account manager, or what you need as a customer success, right? To make it very tailor-made. We also did other projects when it came to our marketing messaging and how we taught sales to understand ICP and buyer personas. So all of these things were sort of going on behind the scenes. And once that role was sort of completed, when I sort of exert my purpose, when they had a framework to be in place, then I moved over to my next VP role. So this is sort of a process where I've been both on the sort of front lines in sales roles. I have gone through the being a group manager and being a head of revenue and having teams and developing and hiring sales reps, both SDRs and account managers, and also being behind the scenes trying to support the leaders of these teams to enable their teams better, right? And a lot of this comes back to training, which is something I'm super passionate about. And I'm sure we will dive into that a bit more, since Skills also is a training platform, both for sales and revenue people, but also for other types of skills that you need in your life. But yeah, I feel like I have sort of gone through steps, because part of me didn't want to go into management roles when I was an SDR and an account manager, because I didn't feel like that was the perfect step for me. I really don't. I am pretty good at management, but I don't love it. I love sales. Like, I love the profession. And yes, I am good at developing skill sets for salespeople. But for me, the frontline work has always been a lot more fun than managing people. I'm going to be honest with that. And that was also one of the questions that I asked myself a lot through my career, which is why I wrote my own role as an example and went and applied for a role I wrote, because I wanted it to be tailored to what I'm good at. And leadership, even though I am good at it because I have the numbers in my teams to prove it, it's never been my passion. Does that make sense? Yeah. And one of the things that I questioned a lot, and that I sat down with a lot of salespeople in my different roles to talk about, was the career ladder, and sort of what are your options as a salesperson to grow your skill sets and to climb. What is the only ladder available? Well, it is like SDR, account manager, maybe enterprise account manager, and then you're up to sales manager, and then you're up to CRO, that type of role, to want to go there. But if you don't enjoy that, if leadership is not your thing, and this we can see in a lot of companies, so salespeople becoming leaders, and that leading to, first of all, the company losing their revenue source, which was that salesperson, and secondly, the team getting a leader that is not up to par with what they actually need. Because skills that you have as a salesperson isn't necessarily the skills you need as a leader.
True. You said so many things here. So it's interesting that you were able to recognize within yourself that you are that you enjoy being not just a rep, but also inspiring and training people more than you enjoyed managing, sifting through KPIs and reports, etc., which is something that not a lot of people can recognize in time. What you did, you basically went and created a role for yourself, which is, again, very unusual, because basically people, they fall into the place and they just kind of accept what is put in front of them, and then they figure out whether that works for them or not, right?
Yes.
And you also mentioned something that I don't think we've ever covered on the podcast before, so I want to ask you about this. How do you see the difference between a scale-up and a startup? Because there is a significant difference.
Yes.
And you obviously had experience in both places, let's put it like that. If I was a fresh SDR, maybe I had a couple of years of experience, whatever, how do I perceive companies, and how do I understand, should I go into a startup or a scale-up, and what's the difference?
I can definitely go into that a bit, because I think it's super interesting, because that also has to do with getting the best options in place for your career, for you, right? Because you can go into a company and fail miserably, but if you went into company B, you could have succeeded, right? Yeah. So when it comes to you looking for your first roles, or you're looking to maybe move, and you're an SDR, you've been working for a few years, both of these situations are very similar. So the first thing I would look at is, who am I as a person? Because being in the startup world, you are so much more important, ergo, you are also so much more pressured. Being more important means that you will get more time with the management team, so the startup founders, right? Which means that you can learn sales from them, which can be super good if you're a person who can handle the pressure. If you don't feel like you want to work in an environment where it's all down to you, and that might feel a bit intimidating in the beginning. Like, if I fail my month, that means that in 2 months, this company might not be affording to pay salaries. That's a lot of pressure, right? So you have to sort of look at your own criteria of who you are as a person. I personally love that situation, because it means that I really matter. And some people will feel like, I really don't want to matter that way, because it's too much pressure. And one of the challenges I see in sales is that we have too homogeneous of groups. So salespeople look a certain way, act a certain way, is a certain gender, has certain qualities. And if we want to move away from that, we need to start talking about all the people who have different criteria who can be good at sales. So now you first have to look at yourself. Am I okay with living in an environment where salaries for other people in this company might depend on what I do? And then you can go into a startup if you're like, yes, I'm okay with that. I feel confident enough that I can deliver. Because the challenge with startups as well, when you're new in sales, is that you won't get a lot of help.
Yeah.
You will get help if you ask for it from the founders and you go with them on meetings, and you learn so much about founder-led sales, which is super, super valuable when you go into scale-ups later too. But you won't get the onboarding that you might need. You won't get anyone sitting you down and saying, now we will train you. It will be all up to you, right?
Yeah.
So if you're good with that, then startups are amazing. If you don't feel fully confident in being able to take on that challenge, I would recommend going into a in-between startup and scale-up, the companies that are on their way to becoming scale-ups, that still has a small enough team for you to get good bonds with your managers. And then when you go into bigger companies, that's when you sort of done this for a few years and you know what's going on and you're understanding more of how founder-led sales works, because that's something most SDRs and salespeople are not familiar with. It's a term that I have talked about for years, how to get into the minds of the founders of the company you're selling products for. Nice. And fully understand what made them drive their first 10, 15 deals, because they have all the magic in here. You just have to pull it out of them. But that's a separate question. So I would say if you feel a bit stress sensitive, which is not necessarily meaning that you're not good as a salesperson, then I would go to the sort of in-between startup and scale up, a bit bigger team, a bit more process in place, so you can get the help you need. And if you're fine with the pressure, then startup is amazing.
So funny. So if I was looking at potential opportunities, right? There's an open role at a startup that just raised a seed round. There's an open role at a startup that raised their, let's say, Series A, maybe Series B, and then there's a startup that is well beyond, like they have the unicorn status. They've raised $70-800 million. Like, are those the buckets where maturity of these roles kind of fit? Like founder-led is probably where in the seed round, and then we've got, right? Is that kind of how it progresses?
Yes, that's how I see it progressing when you look at these companies. And obviously you can get unlucky and you can come into a scale-up that has no idea what the fuck they're doing. Obviously that can happen. So then you need to add other parameters when you make this decision. And when you're looking at roles like this and you decide, so I want to go into scale-up, right? I want to go in there. I see this role. It seems interesting. Then my stronger advice to you, SDR account manager, any sales role, do backdoor references. So you connect with a few people who work in these teams on LinkedIn, and without telling them that you're applying for a job, you ask them about how their environment is. And there's no right or wrong answers here. This is more about matching you to whatever culture is living in there. And the best way to do that is to not mention that you're applying for a job, because people put on a face, and instead just ask them, so I'm in this role now, I feel like this, how do you feel in your role? What's the best part about your company? What is the downsides? Like, just have a human conversation, and you will get a lot more information from that than talking to their manager in an interview.
I like that. I had one more question about the career, but we'll get into that a little bit later. I'm curious about, so how would you describe the current state of the SDR/BDR role? And by the way, when I say SDR, I mean pure outbound focused sales rep. So whether it's SDR, BDR, what is the current state of that role right now in your experience?
Well, so I see a few challenges, right? Because I feel like SDRs and BDRs are being very mistreated right now, which is it's something that I feel is, as leaders, it's our responsibility. We're failing them. So I'm not putting this on the SDRs. It's like putting blame on children for parents not being good parents. But what I see is that a few things. So we're training machines. We're not training people, which leads to that homogeneous group keep being there. We don't have inclusive groups. We don't have people with different perspectives. We don't recruit them. We recruit a certain type of role, and that's it, right? So training machines badly, because I am a machine too, but I have trained myself, and I rest on my core foundation, which is something that's very machine-unlike, but we are training machines in a bad way. We're failing our sales teams members with our leadership ongoingly. We're not helping them enough. We're not training them enough. We're not thinking about the fact that they're people. We're not teaching them interpersonal skills. We are failing our customers by really not giving a shit about them. And that comes through in our leadership and what we train our salespeople on. And one of the symptoms that we can see into this is like, so we have so many salespeople and SDRs and BDRs not reaching quota. 60 to 70% of salespeople are not reaching quota on an ongoing level, which is insane to me. Because this is a sign that something is ill, something is wrong with what we're doing. We have all salespeople and BDRs and SDRs complaining about not getting enough training and guidance, rightfully so, because they are not. We are looking at people getting pushed into BANT and MEDIC and all of these 80s type of sales methodologies. And as we do the training with MEDIC and BANT and all of these things, we're also telling people to use AI. So they're taking these bad strategies and they're failing at scale faster. Like, this is not great. And the people who get called out for this is the individual SDR. Right? They get the blame internally. They get the hate from the customers saying, what the fuck are you doing? You don't know anything about my business. And while they're being complained to, they're also being guided that you need to do more of this. If you just do more of this thing that isn't working, you will be fine. And we can also see sales teams, specifically BDRs and SDRs, not having proper ICPs, not having proper buyer personas, and basically shooting into the void. And they're doing their best. Like, this is not me talking bad about SDRs. I think they're doing an amazing job. I've met so many SDRs that are incredibly knowledgeable and really want to learn and want to know more, and they're doing like LinkedIn interviews with customers. They're trying to figure out their own SCPs because their company is not providing. They're doing all they can, but again, there is a line between our accountability as managers and what an SDR on their own can do.
Yeah.
Like we need to understand that this is something where, and this is what I mean when I say that we're mistreating them. And that doesn't take away your own personal accountability, because you do have it. I have very rarely had good leaders, if I'm going to be honest. Like, that has been good leaders for my type of personality. I think I'm a pretty hard person to manage too, so I'm not going to completely blame it on the people. I will blame it on the dynamic, right? Which is often what goes wrong when you have a leader that doesn't work well with you. It's not them, it's not you, it's the dynamic between you two. And looking at that, I feel like I have always hunted for my own knowledge development. And I have always, every time I found something where this is not in place in the company I'm working for, I will build it myself. That has always been my mindset. And the SDRs who are really, really, really succeeding today are the people who have the same mindset.
Yeah. That reminds me of something that I love discussing and talking about, which is I see SDRs as entrepreneurs, as like early stage CEOs of at least what they are doing for themselves, similar to how, well, basically a CEO who's not necessarily technical, even if they are, is probably of a B2B company, is probably going to be doing SDR type of work 80% of their time anyway. And so it seems like, those real like SDRs are entrepreneurial in their nature. They are going to find ways to get shit done. And if something is missing, they're going to build it. And I think folks who are like that type of person should actually aim for a startup. And then people who rely more on leadership and guidance, I'm not saying one is better than the other, should maybe potentially look for opportunities in a scale-up, right?
Yes, but at the same time, the entrepreneurial SDR who gets shit done, do you understand how much more money they will make in a scale-up than they will in a startup? These people in the startup will hire 2-3 of you, and they will look for these profiles. So you will compete like this. And the incentive models will be badgered by the fact that the company doesn't have that much money, and you will have ceilings and things. In the scale up, since they're expecting lower level of delivery, you will supersede your quota like 200% every month, right? So you will make so much more money in that environment, but you will also be a bit more boxed in by process, right?
Yes.
So this is a difference between can you live with that? Because I've been at companies that are SaaS startups, right? And I've been at SaaS scale-ups. And I have also been in traditional freaking companies, like in Plema, who's a 25-year-old dinosaur in the market selling ERP software on premise in certain cases, like a completely different culture, a completely different speed, a completely different consensus environment, and a very higher level of age. Like, so the mediocre age there was like 45, 50. Very different level. And looking at salary intake for these types of companies, you will make more money, but you will be a bit more bored, like I was. Like, this is just how it, because you're more boxed in and you can't be as out there as you can be in a startup. Because in a startup, I can give you an example. Me and one of my previous coworkers, Therese Olsson, she was a country manager for Lido. She worked at the agency I was working at as marketing manager. We work well together. So we worked at several companies together. One time I was her boss, one time she was my boss. It's worked perfectly. She's on the advisory for Scales too. Like, we really enjoy working with each other. And when we went into Lido, they had a country hub in Sweden. It's a Finnish company selling chatbots functionality platform. And we had no marketing because the Finnish company wouldn't do marketing in Sweden because they don't know what to do in Sweden. And we had full freedom. They were like, do whatever you want. And we started doing webinars. We started participating in podcasts and standing on stage saying that customer experience when it comes to online websites is horrible. Things that no one would have dared to do unless they were us two or like us two together. And that I would have never been able to do at Implema. Because in Plema, I wanted to do a webinar and it took 4 months to just get approval. Like, it's a very different scene, right? Now I was VP Sales New Business. I was responsible for driving lead gen into a new business department that I was building. And still everything took so long. And whenever I was like, but what are we waiting for? The response would be, well, we don't have that. We don't really have a rush, because they were fine financially. And this is a very different, no, but it's a very different experience. And I worked with ERP before, like 12 to 13 years ago. I worked at Deltec for a couple of years as a sales rep for selling Maconomy, which is a big ERP that also came on premise at that point, because this is a long time ago. And the speed was very similar. Right. So if you like short sales cycle and you like sort of the speed of that, you can do a great performance there. But if you want to make a lot of money because you will overperform on expectation, then scale-ups might be a better goal for you. So this is it's interesting though, because these are choices that I think that most people starting out in sales, no one asks them these questions. And I remember when I was hiring my first team, I remember sitting down, because we were an agency selling inbound services. You needed to be a bit more consultative in your approach, but I also needed people to just pick up the phone and call and book meetings, right? Because once I got into the meetings, or my team members got into the meetings, we did great. We just needed more doors open. You know why you would hire SDRs, right? And I was sitting down with these young people, amazing, strong people who were like super excited about getting into sales. And I started our interviews by saying, so I understand that you will not end your career here. Like, you will get new jobs later on. You're not going to stay with us forever. And when you leave, what I want to do is made sure that you have the best framework in place for you to continue to grow throughout your career. The best advantages, the best skill set, the best knowledge, the best network, the best group, like portfolio, so that you can keep climbing into your career as you want to. So what do you feel like you might need for that to work? And that was also my ongoing quarterly meetings when I sat down to discuss progress. These were ongoing questions that I asked, because I thought it was super important to widen their mind into, this is just a job. What do I want to do in my life career-wise? Like, what do I want to do in my life career-wise? And opening that conversation and help them with guiding questions to get their mind to start thinking about these things, start taking control of their career, start taking incentive to do the things they needed to do to get to wherever they wanted to go, even if it wasn't in my company.
I'm taking notes. I'm just like, because this isn't something that you can often hear in interviews, especially in sales. Like, I know, right? It's something that you like. I've never had an interview like that, because companies usually think short term and think egocentrically, which is like. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just simply how it is. And however, the way that you did it, I really like that, and I respect that, simply because I think that it creates more trust right up front because you're not kind of bullshitting around and beating around the bush. But before I forget what I wanted to ask you, so you said that there are these old methodologies that are being used that are like really overdue,
Yeah.
like band, for example.
Yeah.
What, like, do you train folks on different methodologies today, or like what is a healthy alternative for something like that, for example, for band or any other sales methodologies for like qualification or closing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I trained at Stockholm School of Business a couple of years ago, and I trained people who were doing a key account management 2-year training or building education, right? So people who went to school to become account managers and key account managers. And we had a whole session, like a whole program part that had to do with sales methodology. And the school told me, so you need to train them in the different methodologies, and you need to make sure that they feel comfortable with them. And as both you and I know, you can't get comfortable with any methodology besides when you start going to meetings and doing it. So the point of training them in methodology at this point, when they were in school, they weren't working, felt sort of like they will just lose track of this. And also, I don't fully believe that that's the way to go. So what I did was I built the program where I went through like every session was specifically one methodology. So we did the band, we did Medic, we did all of these things, the Sandler's sales methodology, all of these things, right? Value-based selling and all of these things. And I spent a day per 10. I had a top 10, most popular, right? And then at the last session, I sat them down. I was like, so you're going to build your own methodology now. Go. You have a day. So they got a day to take pieces from all of these different methodologies. Beautiful. To build their own. And the point was to build a structure for themselves that fitted their person. And as a person like I am, I have read so many books. I have listened to so many YouTubes and pods, and I have gone to freaking courses, and I have done all of these things to fully understand all the methodologies out there. And then I have rejected 90% of all of the content and picked like the golden nuggets from each of them that has fitted my person. Because I stand on very solid value ground as a person. I want to be honest. So I will not lie to a customer. If there's a better choice, I will tell them. I will not say yes to a deal just because I can get it if it's not a good fit for them. If I think they will churn within a year, I'm not going to sell to them. And I will tell them straight off. Yeah. I want to come off as a person that you can lean on for knowledge to help you make the best decision for you as a customer. That's important for me. And I also want to have clear communication back and forth and have no bullshit. Like a chapter in the book has to do with objection, the objection war, right? And one of the lines in that chapter is, "You are not at war. Stop treating it like you are, because you are not at war." Like, this is not a war. You're supposed to work with your customers and hold their hand, but they need to consent, man. This is not supposed to be a war, right? So when we did that, they all came back with different methodologies suited for their person. And they could take any of these methodologies for themselves and go out to a job, get trained in whatever methodology that company uses, and then reject that and do their own, and they would be fine. So that's my only point of view on this. If that makes sense.
100%. You've been training basically sales rebels.
Yes, that's the point, right? And I love Sales Rebels, by the way, the community. So good. Dale is amazing. So cool. And this is a very good point of view, because I really believe that we are, and that's one of the challenges with training machines into a certain box of how salespeople should be. First of all, we're recruiting, again, one type of person all the time. We're looking for the same criteria. It's all the war analogies and all the, we need to be hunters and blah, blah, blah. Or we can look at authentic people who want to help customers, and we would have great teams. But this is a problem that starts with recruitment and continues building into the culture of the sales teams that we have. And being a female in SaaS and working in this role with technology and with predominantly male coworkers, this is something that I really feel is we are leaving money on the table by recruiting and training this way.
Yeah. Oof, that's a big point. In regards to creating your own methodologies, I really love that approach. That's something that I don't necessarily train my sales reps in my community to like build their own methodologies. What I'm saying is, for example, I coach them on methodologies that I learned from other people, but then I kind of tweaked to fit my own personality, right?
Yes,
so
exactly.
my own rebellious nature. Yes. And then I would say, if somebody tells you that there is only one way to do something, that person is selling you something, right?
Yes, always.
There are gazillion ways of doing things, and I think the best thing that we can all do is like learn as many of those as possible and then apply them to ourselves, which is exactly what you did with yourself, which is what you made your students do. And I really respect that and appreciate that. I just wanted to mention that. But you did say that leadership is failing sales SDR teams because they're failing them with trainings, and they're failing then they're failing with customers, right?
Yes.
And so what is that biggest gap in training and preparing sales reps for their careers, other than obviously presenting them opportunities and like giving them options to, hey, you're not going to be here forever, right? But where are sales leaders and like companies and founders failing with their SDRs?
Yes. So first of all, as the SDR role, and I write about this in the book too, is completely underappreciated, right? It's an underappreciated role. Yeah. They are unappreciated from account management. From
in what sense?
They're just, no, but in the sense of that this, first of all, is looked at as an entry role, which is bullshit. It's one of the hardest roles you can have in the revenue team, just to be clear. And secondly of all, we're not looking at quality training. We're not looking at quality numbers. We're only looking at quantity, right? And having a role where you want to bring value to customers and you want to help customers find your product and you want to help them get to a point where they can book a meeting with you, like all of these things are helpful things you're trying to do. We are training them in quantity, and then we're blaming quantity on them. Like that's one of the ways that we're underappreciating them and under-training them, right? So we're telling them your KPI is booked meetings. But if you don't do quality booked meetings, even though we're pushing for quantity, we will be frustrated with you and we won't give you your commission, right? And this is a challenge overall with how we see this role. The second part is that we're not working with authenticity in our training. Right. So we're training them on doing a numbers game where they themselves become the only number that matters. And they have 8 to 10 or 15 hours, depending on how long you work on a day, to produce numbers, but we're not giving them the tools they need to produce really good quality numbers when it comes to booked meetings that turns into closed deals, right? Yeah. So instead of training them in how an ICP actually looks and figuring it out through listening with them on their calls, by training them live, by teaching them and putting them in contact with customers so that they can book an interview and a lunch and talk to their customers and better understand their customers, they're basically training them in how to do a cold call pitch without any reference to who the person on the other side is. The best SDRs figure this out themselves. Most companies doesn't provide it. So they will give you, this is our buyer persona, which is a document of a person documented, right? This is how that person looks. And now we want you to call and pinpoint these typical pain points that that person has. While doing that versus telling them, you will book 10 launches with the buyer persona that we have for you. You will interview them and not try to sell anything to them. Here are a few questions you can ask. Have conversations, understand fully what's going on in their heads. Here is a bunch of podcasts talking about the market industry the buyer persona has. Listen to them. Yeah. And again, the best SDRs will do this on their own after tripping. They will be like, I have a gap in my knowledge, I need to fill it. But most people aren't wired like this. So we can provide a framework for getting them to fully get to know their buyer personas and their ideal customer profiles. But we're not doing that. And then we're blaming them for not delivering numbers. And if they're delivering numbers, we're blaming them for delivering low quality numbers. And this is a blame game that is not fair to the SDR. Because not everyone can be me or Dale Dupree or George Storm or you, Stefan. Like not everyone can be wired this way. We should still be able to train them to feel very comfortable and happy and excited about doing cold calling, because it's super fun when you know your buyer persona and your industry. Like it's so much fun. But that's not how most SDRs perceive it. Most SDRs perceive this as something, a fire test they need to go through to get to account management.
Yeah.
And that's sort of sad because it's such a fun role.
Yeah. Funny you mentioned account manager role. I was just about to transition into that. Like, okay, so let's say that I've done well. I found podcasts. I figured everything out. I'm a top performer. what now, right? Because my probably, and this is the majority of SDRs, BDRs, when they come into the roles, they are
Yeah.
expecting to get promoted to account executive, or
Yes.
like they're aiming for that. Why? Because
Yeah.
well, one, everybody's doing it, right? So that's kind of the natural path. And then
Yeah.
secondly, I want to do sales, and so account executive is the next best thing. And then like that's basically it. I don't have other options. Well, I
No.
do, but my
Yes.
perception of as an SDR is that's basically the only path that I'm going to take. And
Yeah.
there's like 5 to 10% of people who are just killers. They know what they want. They're going to do it, and they're going to become AEs in
Yes.
like 6 to 12 months. And that's it. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
But the majority of people just default to it. And that is my problem with it.
Yeah,
and that's
right.
that's why I wanted to ask you. So
Yes.
what are career opportunities for SDRs? Let's just kind of open up our minds here and
Yes.
brainstorm a little bit. Like, what are the options for SDRs?
Yeah.
What can they become? And I have a reason why I'm asking this. Last week, I had a chat with Steve Schmidt. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's doing a bunch of cool content on LinkedIn. He used to run an SDR agency, or like sales development agency. And he gave a very good point, which is, if you want to like be a content creator, like you got to pave that path yourself, but that is a viable path. So what other paths do we have for SDRs?
Yes. So when it comes to, if you want to stay in the gig, right? If you don't want to move to live on your side hustles, because there's plenty of those, by the way. But if you don't want to move to live on your side hustles, and we can talk about this in a second. So for me, when I was doing SDR work, I loved it so much. I didn't want to move. I just wanted to be better. I was just chasing numbers, like for years as an SDR. I was just chasing. I want more quality meetings on less outreach. More quality meetings on less outreach, more quality meetings coming to me. Like, I had a completely different viewpoint of this. I didn't want to get rid of cold calling because I liked it, but I wanted each call to be a person who knew who I was. That was my line, right? So I want to make sure that I'm doing all the content on LinkedIn. I'm building a personal brand. So when people get a call from me, they might actually know who I am based on name, right? So that's what I wanted. And I also wanted to be having discovery calls in my first calls rather than a booked a meeting. So I wanted to sort of do some discovery in the first call to actually understand if it was a fit. So my end goal with my calls when I was doing SDR work a lot at the end was not to book the meeting. It was to understand, are we a fit? And you can do that in 10 to 15 minutes. And once a person allows you to start talking, you can really get into really interesting conversations. So getting them to want to talk to you was the first goal. Secondly, it was to do a really good discovery, very, very short, to see if we should have a meeting or not. And I'm talking about the book in the book a lot, because I really believe that we can create like quality conversations that is great for the customer. So even if they hang up and they don't want to buy from me, they still learn something about their own situation, or about their own challenge, or about the potential solutions on the table, even if that wasn't me. And
how can companies afford this? Because, and like, this is a leading question, but I know that I've been exposed to companies, like the mindset there is, the SDR is an expendable resource that, like, I don't necessarily want to invest too much money into a role that's just going to book meetings. Like the value, right, is going to happen later in the 80% of the relationship, and this 20% of the relationship is not that valuable, so to speak. It's not going to lead to revenue necessarily, right? And so how do companies change how do they change their mindsets in order to see like it's actually an investment in your pipeline later on? Whereas if you don't have that 20%, the 80% is not going to happen. Like, and we could even argue that 20% of effort is going to create the 80% of I mean, it's Pareto all over again, everywhere you look. But it's just like it's a funny thought here. So how are you thinking about this?
I agree with you so much. So first of all, most SDRs, based on how they are trained and how the role is structured, they're doing 5%. Other people are doing the rest, right? But SDRs can do 25% of the value if they are trained properly. So one of the things that I look at when it comes to SDR role to change the perspective of this is that this is not supposed to be valuable only for you as an SDR and as a company. This is supposed to be valuable for your customer, for the person you're talking to. Because if that's the framework you go on, which is why I'm going on and on about buyer persona understanding, deep understanding of your decision makers, deep understanding of your industry, every call is an opportunity to educate a person and give them value. And if we see the SDR as the first intro to your company, not just someone who opens the door, but someone who gets the person to want to come in through the door, then suddenly a lot of the work that we can do as SDRs is immense, because the customer can walk away from an SDR call remembering the company well. And I don't mean the thing we're talking about where, I know the company name, but actually having so this SDR called me from this company and they helped me so much whenever a need pops up. And this is about being top of mind. But as an SDR, for me, since I both did SDR work and I have been an account executive, right? I've had both of these roles. I both booked my own meetings as an account executive and I got SDR meetings coming in. So I was half responsible for my own budget and my own deal pipeline, and I had SDR meetings come in. Yeah. And the meetings that I booked myself, because every session, every time I sat down to reach people, we always had an actually more exploratory conversation. So, and I've been told so many times how bad this is to do, but many of the conversations when I started the conversation was, look, I have done research, and I mean actual research, not I want to sell this, it looks like you're a fit, but actual research on the company. I've done some research. A lot of what I see leads me to a conclusion that we might be a fit. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions to determine if it's even worth any of ours time?
Is that how you start a cold call?
Yeah, it's many times how I have started a cold call. And they're like, yeah, okay, yeah, I guess. And then I ask initiated questions. It like can't be the generic. No, but initiated questions has to do with the company I'm reaching out to. So it's been tailor-made per company. So I see that you guys are hiring your sales reps, but I can also see that last year you had a margin of this and you have this amount of salespeople, which leads me to believe that you only closed 14 deals last year. Is that what you're looking to do this year? Because you're increasing with 4 salespeople. This should mean that you should go up to this amount of deals. How are you going to get there? And these are questions that you can't ask if you haven't done research on the company. And we're talking 10 minutes of research. Like most SDRs do no research. I get calls every day where they're like, so maybe you need SAP consultants. Like, I have 2 startup companies. Why would I need SAP consultants? That's right. We're in Google Suite and Weebly. Exactly. Like, are you serious now? And these are things that, again, it's not the SDR's fault. This is management just giving them a list and saying, call them and ask if they need SAP consultants.
Agreed.
Like, come on. This is not fair to the SDR. It's not fair to the customer. We need to, give a shit about what they're going through too, and be tailor-made. AI is not helping that at all.
Well, it's just automating a bunch of bad
crappy messaging. Yes,
exactly. It's like you have bad habits that form because of lack of leadership or whatever the reason, and then you're just automating those things and like hoping for the best
to reach more people.
And it's just it might even produce results, but at what cost?
Yes. And that's a great question.
So a very popular argument for doing no research before a cold call, etc., is, hey, you don't need to do research. You need to qualify and move as quickly as possible through your list or whatever. And that works. Like, I've seen examples of people really managing to do that. Now, you've been talking about a completely different approach where you're actually... And so the argument around SDRs doing so much research is because they're kind of procrastinating and trying not to, because maybe they're afraid of the phone call. Maybe they're afraid, right? Again, I think that goes back to poor leadership and training. But
poor recruitment. That goes back to poor recruitment. Right. We recruited people who don't want to have this role. That's what that goes back to. No, but seriously, the fear of the phone. Why the hell would you go into an SDR role if you're scared of being rejected? Like that's not a framework where that's recruiting going wrong, right?
Right.
So one of the things that I believe, because I do believe that research is called upon to procrastinate. I really believe that because I've seen and trained a lot of salespeople. I was training Microsoft partners. We had a whole partnership with Microsoft. I was training their partner companies in Sweden for social selling, and I've never seen a more procrastinating group in my life. And they were also afraid of the phone. So doing research would be like a day's work. And that's crap. The reason why salespeople who are really, really understanding of ICP and buyer persona, why they can call without research is because that list is very specific. It's one industry, it's one decision maker list. You already have done research, not individual to the company, but to the industry and the buyer persona. So you can qualify. Most SDRs don't have that situation. Yeah. So you have a multi-dialer in place, right? You sit and you make, 2,000 phone calls over a week or 2 weeks, and you are not good at qualification because you don't know your ICP and you don't know your buyer persona, and then it falls flat. If you do know your ICP, if I'm only calling banks, I have done my research on the banking industry. I can talk to banks in my sleep. Yeah. Because then it's fine. And I don't disagree with that framework. But when I was an SDR, when I started that role, it was like 10, 12 years ago. Like this is old school shit, right? So what I did was that I tried to look at my hit rate of booked meetings to close deals. These were my qualification points, not number of pickups, but actually how many people do I talk to? How can I convert as many of them as possible to booked meetings? And how can I make sure the salesperson, if that's the salesperson doing it, converts as many of those to close deals as possible?
Beautiful.
Which also led me to when I created my lists, because I was in startup environment, so I built my own list, right? I did it so specifically. So I would do like 2 weeks of work from a prospecting. So I did a list of 100 companies per week that I worked on. That's it. They were one industry. There was one decision maker title. And I researched the industry and the decision. And then I went into their website. I looked at their financial statements, and then I called, which led to me booking 7 out of 10 calls.
Boom.
It's very different, right?
Yeah, that's insane.
So the procrastination part, I understand. And again, you might discuss to yourself, maybe I'm in the wrong fucking role. Maybe I should go into customer success. No bad thing about going into customer success. I have met many salespeople who should be there, that all they want is to help. Yeah. They don't want to hunt numbers. They don't want to cold call. They just want to talk to people they know and help them more. So then go into customer success. Yes, they would love it, by the way, but they're struggling and staying in the role for whatever reason. I don't know.
There's this, you're going to appear weak. You're going to, we called out, whatever.
Do you know where that comes from? The homogeneous cis-het male grouping that are in sales. That's where that mentality comes from. Because personally, I have always aimed to help as much as I can and to be value creating for the people I interact with. And I have never sat down at the end of a sales process and had to basically try to convince a person to buy from me, because if I have to, I have failed. Yeah. Like this is not complicated, and we're making it so complicated with all the methodology and all the thought process around how you should handle objection. How about every time you get an objection, you ask, I understand that you feel like that. Can you tell me a bit more? And that's it. Yeah. Just see if you can understand them.
Why? Why do you feel that way? And then you get it. I think I actually came across, was it Sarah Brazier or somebody on LinkedIn? I think she had a similar point, which is like, did you get an objection? Cool. Don't try to handle it. Ask, why do you feel that way?
Yes.
And it's such a simple concept, but we're constantly we're trained to handle the objection and to persuade and so that's where I think we all get lost, myself included. And you look like you want to say something.
No, but I think that if you look at this as a relationship, so my relationship to my husband, right? So when he comes to something that in sales methodology would be an objection, that's him voicing a fear, a concern, a worry. If I can understand where that concern, worry or fear comes from, I can meet him. So human to human, I can meet him. If my reaction is, so how should I handle him now? Is that a human way to approach a person? No.
Agreed.
Is our customers human beings? Yes. This is not so complicated. So when you get an objection, first of all, people who actually want to do business with you, they will tell you things. An objection is a customer coming to you with a concern they have. Yeah. So at some level, you have trust. they have trust in you enough that she will tell me how to feel about this now, because I'm feeling worried. She will help me figure it out. And if you meet dicks who have objections because they're playing a game with you, maybe you don't want to do business with them anyway, man. Like, I don't know.
True. Sarah, I gotta start wrapping up, because like this can go on for at least another hour. And,
I know, right?
And we have a cap, but I really enjoyed it. So, like you've been mentioning the book, I think, like, where do people find the book? What is the book named? And
Yes.
Where can people find the book? And give us the details.
Yes, so the book is called Sales, A Complete SDR Playbook. I talk a lot about account management and sales overall in the book too, but this is really a good starting point if you just got into the SDR game, or if you've been there a few years. This will just level up your game on all the levels. And it's on Amazon, so you can find it in most of the Amazon stores in the different countries. And there is both a Kindle version and a hardback version. So that's gonna be just search on Amazon and you will find it. And then as an addition to that, I also launched 3 different digital resources. So what I looked at was, so these are the challenges that I see. Like, I see that we're training salespeople the wrong way. We have a leadership issue. We have a challenge with making people be machines, and we're also not giving them the tools. So what I did was I created an SDR week, the perfect time management, an actual schedule for an SDR in a document format, an ultimate buyer persona, how to build your own, and an ultimate ideal customer profile, how to build your own, right? So these are 3 resources that I launched together with the book. They are very much mentioned in the book, but if you want to buy smaller pieces of this because you feel like you're struggling with time management, or you're struggling to get buyer persona and ICP from your company, take it into your own hands. This is your career. This is your development.
Nice.
And just get the things that you need to be really good at what you do, because this, again, it's such a fun role when you have the tools in place. Like, you will enjoy it so much more when you know how to talk to the person on the other end of the phone, and know what they're struggling with, and know how to talk to them in a way that is human, right? So that's the things that I released now. It was last week, everything came out and was finished. And we also have a lot of skills. Is obviously a learning platform. We have an entire revenue universe of different modules for revenue people in different levels. We will have enterprise focus on a couple of the modules. We will have SDR roles. I am doing a lot of that training. Henrik Clayton, another trainer, does. It's also a really successful SDR. He will train an SDR mindset. Like, there are things to do when it comes to, as soon as the app that we have will launch, which will be in a week or two, to get access to really, really good, like, short format training material. And we will charge you 19 euros a month, and that's it. And you will get access to this entire library of really amazing trainings. Yes.
That's really impressive. All right, I'm gonna link all of that down below in the description. Cool. Well, Sarah, I really appreciate you for coming on. I really appreciate you for sharing your expertise and your experience in leading sales teams, and being a voice for SDRs. I think that's really needed these days, especially when it comes to AI and the automations that are kind of hitting the SDRs left and right. And it's just a good feeling when you know that there's someone in your corner kind of rooting for you and trying to make your life better. So I really appreciate you for coming on, sharing your expertise. Guys, for the rest of you who are listening, if I forgot to ask something, Sarah, drop a comment below, ask Sarah away. I'm gonna just forward the question to her and get back to you as soon as possible. And until next time, Sarah, this was a pleasure. Thank you for coming on.
The same. Bye, Stefan.